Not only will AI not take away cybersecurity jobs, it's actually going to be creating more of them. Here's why we're about to see another golden age of cybersecurity. And if you're new to the channel, my name is Ryan from Elevate Cyber, and I'm a cybersecurity professional with over a decade of experience ranging from multiple Fortune 500 companies to the US government and freelance contracts. Now, let's get right into the video. So for this video, I'd consider just doing my research on it and then just presenting it like I would any other video. I decided instead, I want to walk you guys through from the source so you can see that this is not me just making some big claim, big statement. This is a narrative that I'm starting to see from multiple sources. The first place that I saw this was, it was about a year ago where I heard some reports of being 40% more vulnerable code out there now that AI is used to generate code a lot more predominantly in the software development space. And then just last week, and I'll put this up on the screen right now, I saw an article from the CEO of Sneak reporting the exact same thing. If you don't know what Sneak is, well, they have an entire database of tracking security vulnerabilities in third-party software. So yeah, maybe the CEO is privy to some information that you and I aren't. Maybe they know a thing or two about the stuff. So if they're saying that, then yeah, I think this is attention worthy. This article here, it's going to use a lot of studies and data by companies that actually own the static code scanners out there that are finding security issues in code. So very interesting article. So let's just get right into that. Now, this was written by Robert Lemos at Dark Reading, and essentially, the premise is that LLMs, AI-generated code, remains wildly insecure. And they bring up something known as security debt. We're going to get into that and why that's relevant. First of all, a little back information. If you don't know what an LLM is, essentially it stands for large language model. So if you just think of like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, all of that, those forms of AI are using, they're basically a subset of them known as LLMs, or large language models. So if you don't think you know what they are, I'll guarantee you pretty much do. And the first thing that they mentioned just off the cuff here is that even though the vibe coding, so if you know vibe coding, right, it's like when developers will prompt the AI to have them write functionality, just spit out the code automatically. So you could say, I don't know, build me a landing page with this, and this parameter in Python, and it'll start coding it up or whatever, or in whatever language, and it'll build it for you. What they found is that even though these have improved a lot in terms of the code compiling without failing due to errors, it hasn't really improved much on the security side. Now, how insecure are these? We're going to get into that in just a second. But off the cuff here, what they mention is that it particularly continues to fall short for AI-generated Java code. Now, why is that interesting? If you guys know anything about the big corporations out there, they love to use Java code. They love their Java and their C# and things like that. And so I'll tell you, as someone, like I said in the beginning of this video, that has worked for multiple Fortune 500 companies, US government, all that, in these environments, they absolutely love their Java code. There will be a lot of Java there. And so if these companies are trying to use AI, which trying to rack my brain to think of a company that isn't trying to rush to use AI right now, if I'm being honest, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to start vibe coding. They're going to start, I even talk about this like they're going to. They already are. Let's be a little more accurate here. They already are vibe coding. They already are using these code tools. Why? Think about it from a business perspective. So what does the market want? The market always favors solutions that are thought to be better, faster, and cheap. Using these vibe coding LLMs, AI tooling, it is all three of those, right? We'll get to how much better is it really, but it is better in the sense that they can crank out code faster and cheaper than they were able to before. So because of that, and because there's an AI arms race, these companies are rushing in to use this. But could there be some security ramifications for that? Well, there were some studies done here, and mainly the study here is they took over 100 LLMs, all the big ones, a bunch of small ones too. This was done by Veracode. If you're not familiar with Veracode, this is a huge application security firm that does static code assessments and things like that, and they have state-of-the-art tooling that all the big companies are using. So Veracode tested these AI chatbots to see if they could produce code using the correct syntax for 4 languages. And I believe it was like Python, Java, and I think they say what the other 2 were a little bit later in here. And then after that, they scanned the code for vulnerabilities to see if it was actually secure. And what they found is that AI generated code improved greatly, going from about 20% completion to 90% within the last 2 years, right? Because in 2023, the biggest issue was that the vibe coding, the AI suggested code that wouldn't even compile. Like it would error out, it wouldn't be syntactically correct. And so all of the energy and focus has been on getting that number up as high as possible, because remember, you got to think in terms of business, right? They want code that works so they can make more money, so they can deploy that and ship the product. So all the focus was there, and they actually made a lot of strides. They went from 20% to 90% in just 2 years. But here's the kicker to that. Only 55% of the code passed the security scans that Veracode ran. And here's the more alarming thing than even that. This number has basically not really changed much over time. And we'll look at the graphs here in just a second where we can see like how little has it changed. Yeah, basically go on to say, LLMs are not giving anyone a free pass out of doing the security work they need to do, and the code that they're learning from is syntactically correct, but most of the developers, particularly non-enterprise, non-open source projects, don't really understand security ramifications and the decisions they make. Now, if you guys have ever tried to learn programming, or if you've ever just heard about this, right? I think a lot of people might have. If you just go and you Google how to do X, Y, or Z in the programming language, like not even using AI, just taking I guess we can call it the boomer solution now of just Googling, the old school Google for the answer thing. A lot of times you would get hits from sites like Stack Overflow, and there will be a top upvoted answer, and not always is that way the most secure. It might work, it probably will work if it's upvoted, but a lot of times there are security vulnerabilities associated with that way. While it technically works, it's not the secure way to do it. And so we even had this problem to a degree before the advent of AI, where people would just copy paste these code snippets they found online and introduce vulnerabilities that way. But there was more manual, coding stuff happening at that time. So people that were more senior, people that were more savvy to this stuff, they would know to modify the code because they were still, I guess, a little bit closer to the project. Now, when you're just prompting AI in a vibe coding fashion, and you're more removed from the actual line by line aspects of the code, and you're more thinking in chunks of code and functionality, and you're just like copy slapping it in there, there is a greater chance that these bugs slip through the cracks. And if you're doing this as someone that's a junior developer, well, you're not even going to know that code is vulnerable. Even if you're mid-level, you might not know, or senior level, you might not know, because there is a huge knowledge gap from the security and the software development side that exists as well. As you can imagine, this is pretty problematic here. So here's what they also went on to say. In the past 2 years, the use of LLM code generation has exploded. Now, that's no surprise, right? And it has to do with those business reasons that I just mentioned. It's all about being the first to market. It's all about being, on the cutting edge. And these companies, they want to ship more code faster at a lower cost, right? So I don't foresee this trend reversing. I think the cat's out of the bag. I don't really foresee them being like, oh, okay, guys, there's a lot of security issues. Let's dial it back. Let's do things the old way again, because they know that their competitor is going to keep using this stuff and just going to outpace them. So they're in this kind of catch-22. Obviously they need to tighten up their security, but I think a lot of companies might be in the dark about this. They probably don't even know just how much security debt they have acquired. But even still, if a company were to take the security aspect and be like, okay, we're going to take this really serious, that would come at the cost of now they would be moving at 1/10 of the speed of their competitors. So just think about all this through the business lens for a second, right? But yeah, when non-developers use these to generate code, which that's another thing that we're starting to see happen a lot too, is they're like, oh, we don't need developers anymore because we got AI, right? And then what happens when non-developers use this? You're almost certainly going to have these vulnerabilities 55% of the time, because they're going to have no idea if something's vulnerable or not. So this is one of the big challenges that I'm seeing right now. Yeah, it doesn't really matter if it's a good or bad thing, right? Because it's just something we're just going to have to get better at, securing, because the cat's out of the bag, like I said. But here was something that's pretty interesting. It said the LLM size didn't matter either. They tested it against LLMs of widely varying sizes, and gave it 80 different coding tasks as well to each bot. And what it found was that there was no appreciable difference between the number of vulnerabilities in the most expensive LLMs and the least expensive one. But if you want to see how this all maps out, we can take a look at that in a second. Also, OWASP top 10 is what it found a lot. And now it did depend on what the vulnerability was. So it found that like the stuff that has to do with cryptography is pretty good. Like the LM's pretty good at writing cryptographically secure stuff and using cryptographically secure libraries. But and it's good against preventing against SQL injection, some of these more well-known ones. But ones that are more difficult to secure against, like cross-site scripting, it really struggled against, because cross-site scripting, if you don't know, is really hard to secure against because there's so many ways to be vulnerable to that. You got to be very thorough to secure every single possible parameter from something like XSS. Now, what it noted is that most of the modern LLMs improve the success rate to between 40 and 60%, but the average LLM only produced secure code 55% of the time. But still, that's a very, I don't like those odds. I don't know about you guys. If there's thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands, millions of lines of code in a lot of cases, let's be honest, and every time you deploy that code, there's like a 55% chance that it's vulnerable. Yeah, I don't like those odds. I don't like those odds, guys. Let's take a look at the graph here, though. You can see over time, from the advent of this stuff back in 2023 to the current day. And this is a very recent article. And the data here tracks all the way to like April. So fairly recent, a few months ago. We can see that the blue is the pass rate, meaning how frequently the code actually compiled without errors. It used to be super low, down around 20% here. And they got it up to about like 90%. So super high. And this line here is for the security pass rate. You can see it almost flatlined, like it's slightly improved, but not by any like appreciable difference. Really, it's around like a little above 50%. Didn't even hit it went from like 50% to 55%. And I mean, there's some pretty bad outliers here too as well on the scatter plot. So that doesn't bode very well, I would say. And like I was saying earlier, the AI generated Java code is particularly bad. And here's where they went into detail on what I was just telling you guys with SQL injection and cryptography being pretty decently secured, like way up here. But if you look at some other issues like cross-site scripting, log injection, and things like that, those ones were super low pass rate on that. Like we're talking sub 20%. Most of the time. And actually, those have gotten worse. You see that? Like in 2023, it was this good at detecting cross-site script. It was pretty darn bad, right? It was like 25% maybe. And now it went down to like sub 20%. So yeah, this is not looking good. There's a few kind of theories out there of why it's particularly bad with Java code. And I think it mentions some pretty interesting things to think about. Like, for example, with Java code, it's a language that has been around for so long. You got to remember the AI models, they're trained on the internet data. And so a lot of the code snippets out there are super old before security was in the limelight like it is today, back when it was an afterthought. And so a lot of the resources and code snippets out there online are more of like proof of concepts and not really meant for production code. And this exists to varying degrees across all programming languages, but especially a more legacy language like Java. Some people might get triggered that I call Java a legacy language, but let's be honest, it's been around for a really long time. And so a lot of the code out there, the code snippets are not really security minded. And so the LMs are learning from that and they're suggesting that code, and therefore you're having these security issues spring up a lot more. And so here's the takeaway with all this is that this is making the security debt of these companies grow. Now, what is security debt? Well, security debt is, if you think about it, 55% success rate on whether it's secure or not. You keep compounding that year after year, even month after month, they're deploying chunks and chunks and chunks of code that are each 55% maybe insecure. So that stacks on top of each other. After 1 year of doing that, after 2 years of doing that, how many vulnerabilities do you think you now have out there? And that is why I think that we're going to see a golden age. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to learn this stuff and capitalize on this golden age, definitely you want to arm yourself with mentorship to accelerate that process and get ahead of the curve. So book a call down below in the description. And if you are trying to get into the field and you're debating between whether you should get into SOC analyst or pen tester, or like what is the easier path so you can take advantage of this stuff, then check out the video that I have on screen right now.